Welcome. Just giving you an update on my Great Central Atlantic and what the progress is so far. So far I've got to a stage where I just need to put handrails on and there's some footsteps and then it's ready for painting. But I have had it running, but it didn't run quite as I would like it to do, and there's a few little problems, but you sort of expect that on your first run. Nothing always runs perfectly first time, unless you're very lucky. The big issue I had was my track radius is not very large, so I had a bit of binding on the wheels with the flanges because the distance between the front driving wheel and the back trailing wheel, there's quite a gap there, quite a big pitch. So as my track's got quite a tight curve on it, it was binding on the radius. So what I did, I thought, good idea, I'll take a flange off the centre wheel. I've done that on one of my other locos and that ran fine. So I did it on this one, but what was happening, the front of the wheel was just dropping inside the rail and it was catching, so that didn't really work. So what I had to do, I had to buy 2 more castings for the wheels and remachine them, so the flanges are back on, and basically I wasted my time taking the flanges off, but no big deal. The wheels are very cheap to buy off Walsall Model Engineering Supplies, and it doesn't take long to machine them. They're cheaper to buy if you machine them yourself. I think you can get them machined for you by them, but obviously that would cost you a bit more. But after doing that, I thought, oh, I had another idea, bit of a brainwave. I thought, you don't get a lot of movement on the trailing wheel, but what I thought I'd do, if I tip it over, I can show you. You probably can't see it from there, but I counterbored the back of the wheels, because where it runs on the axle boxes, there's not a lot of movement. But what I've done, I counterbored the back of the wheel, so it gave me quite a bit more movement. I don't know if you can just see that. So that actually worked. So it ran around the track, but I still had a few issues. It wasn't sort of holding its steam pressure. And then I found, I think the burners were a bit too high, so I reduced the height of the burners, and then that sort of made quite a bit of difference. Anyway, that's the stage I've got to, and I'm quite happy with it so far. For those of you who don't know how it actually works, there'll be a few people, well, there'll be quite a lot of people watching the channel know how a steam locomotive works, but this design has a copper boiler and it's a multi-flue tube. There's 7 tubes that goes down into the firebox, where my previous loco was a schools class and it was based on a single flue down the middle with cross tubes. So there's a few different designs of boilers, but this type is like a multi-flue. Spirit fired boiler. In the tender you have a spirit tank that feeds the burners, and at the front here I have a lubricator. It's a displacement lubricator. Let me just move the camera so you can see it. At the front here there's a displacement lubricator. What you do with this displacement lubricator, it's actually fed from the steam chest. There's a small pipe with a small hole. The steam enters a chamber which is full of steam oil, and the oil mixes with the steam, and then it's fed back into the valve chest, which feeds the cylinders, keeps it all lubricated. So that's quite a useful way of keeping the steam lubricated into the cylinders and the valve gear and everything. You mostly find the displacement lubricators on smaller locomotives or smaller steam engines, but the bigger scales do have mechanical type as well. So, but for this scale, it's a bit easier to make a displacement lubricator. Let me show you the tender. Right, this is the spirit tank, and you fill it up through this plug here. This shuts it on and off, so you can control the flow. And what it is in the bottom, there's a sump. If you can just see that in there, that sump keeps it level so it doesn't overflow, and it's slightly below the burners so you don't get overspilling on the burners, and then it can create a fire. If it overspills on burners, gets on the track, create a fire. But so this sump keeps it at a certain level. In here I've got the hand pump. This will be full of water. This is for people that don't actually know how one of these works, so I'm sure many of you watching this would know, but that's a hand pump that feeds water into the boiler. I've also got a plug in the top. I can unscrew that and I can fill it from there as well if I wanted to. And it's easier to check the level as well. Inside the cab, if we can just see, there's a pressure gauge. Pressure gauge is set to 60 psi. Well, the pressure gauge goes up to 120, I think, but the actual safety valve is set to 60 psi. So if it goes over 60, the safety valve would let off steam to keep the boiler at no more than 60 psi. That's more for safety than anything else. And right, as you can see in here, there's a valve in there. This is called a bypass valve. So what it is, the actual, let me roll this over so you can see. Right, this is the underside of the locomotive. This is under the tender. There's a pipe that comes out of the bottom of the tender and it's fed all the way down to here, which is the axle pump. This pump actually pumps water back into the boiler. It's driven off a cam on the centre axle and it's pumped back up this tube, and it comes along this tube, and you have two options here. If this is a bypass valve, when that's shut off, it's the water out of the axle pump is fed back up another tube going back into the boiler, so this keeps the boiler topped up with water. Now you can get the boiler with too much water in it. You shut off this, you open this bypass valve, and then instead of going up into the boiler, it will continue back up and back into the tender. This is and here is the underside of the spirit sump. So the spirit comes down this other tube and fills these burners up with wicks on them, and that's what heats the water to generate the steam. Again, on this centre axle, we've got two cams either side of the axle pump cam, and these drive the valves. Obviously the valves control the steam going into the cylinders. The cylinders were made from castings. I've got that on another video if you want to see a bit of the work done on them. The only things I really had to buy to make this locomotive was the wheels, but they were rough cast and still had to machine them, and the cylinders. Most of the things are scratch built. The boiler, I've completely made the boiler myself. Yeah, that's it really. A few little bits. You can get a few little bits and pieces and scratch builds. There's kits as well you can buy off different suppliers, or you can buy a complete loco, get it out of the box and run it. But I do prefer to build it all myself. I think I get my enjoyment out of the making of it and putting it all together and getting it to run. Yeah, I did have another issue as well when running. I don't know if you can just see in there, that studding was hitting the back of the boiler, and I had to cut a bit more off. The studding is just the back of the valve straps, goes through the valve straps, so they were a bit too long, so that was another issue I had. When you have a first run, you're very lucky to get it running perfectly the first time. There's always a few issues, but I think I managed to sort them all now, and it's ready for another test run on the track. Hopefully all goes well this time. Anyway, here's the if you can see better now, here's the trailing wheels, and you can see there's a lot more movement in here because where I've counterbored it goes over these axle boxes, so it gives you more movement. So now it actually goes around the track without binding, so just by giving me that bit more movement. Anything else on here I can explain? That's about it really.